So, growing up, I was adopted when I was 3 years old by my grandparents, and I grew up in a place called Mottville, Michigan. It was pretty, out in the country a little bit, away from things, away from people. I remember always thinking, wondering who my parents were, and, I heard my grandparents talk about them a lot at times, and not in the best light either. But despite them trying to push me away from, wanting to do the things my parents did, I still had this attachment where I felt like that's where my real identity had been, stored. So I was always seeking out opportunities to learn more about them. I learned that my dad was on drugs and went to prison. I learned that my mom had been on drugs, and drugs was a real common theme. So sure enough, I began to act out when I was around 13 years old, and that's when I first, started doing drugs, smoking weed, doing pills, smoking cigarettes. But it was more for this sense of identity. These kids that I was hanging out with that were doing these things, they found their identity in this lifestyle, and their parents were mostly drug users as well. And so I just felt like I belonged to that crowd. Although my grandparents weren't, drug users, and they were trying to steer me in the right direction, it never worked. It was like I didn't feel like I belonged in the group that my grandparents were trying to push me into. I felt like I belonged with these other crowd of individuals. And so, just outrageous, out of control behavior started happening around 13 years old. And, the teachers are all telling my grandma that I was out of control and I had ADHD. And so sure enough, she took me to the doctor, and like that, I got a prescription for, amphetamines at 13 years old. I was taking 40 milligrams of amphetamines. The first day I took it, I was zooming, going out of control. And, the second hour of class, I was hyperventilating in the hallway because I had mixed 4 horse pill size speeder supplements with them, because I was like, I don't want to be calm and have no personality. I want to still be me, full of energy. And, people, they get afraid of, kids with energy, kids with, high energy levels. It's like, that is something beautiful. That's something that needs to be stewarded. And yes, it might require a little bit more time, a little bit more intentionality with your kid, but it's something well worth it. And now looking back, at what happened to me, I would definitely encourage any of you parents, to put that extra time in your kids. Don't put them on a pill. But fast forward a little bit, I got my first felony at 13. It was a prank call bomb threat. I'm just out of control. I'm breaking into houses by the time I'm 16 with these wannabe gangsters. I'm going to, the hood to get marijuana, and just going to some real dangerous places. If my child now, was doing the things that I was doing, I'd be very livid, and I would hunt down some people. I put it into it real quick. That's what I say now, but as me, I was just out of control, and there's nobody that can control me. My dad probably could have honed it in. He could have disciplined me. I know that he was a tough guy back then, but he was also a tough guy to get a hold of. So, he was in and out of my life, barely saw him. I really craved his attention and didn't get it like I needed. And I think that would have really helped my behavior. And I'm not making excuses for my behavior at all, but if I'm looking at this from the outside in, or looking at it as how I would, mentor another child, I would take a look at these factors. These factors are very important, and they mean a lot. So yes, I think it was a big deal that I didn't have my father in my life. My mother, a boy, I think they can deal without their mother as better than they can without their dad. And that's just facts, at least from my experience. So I got my second felony when I was 16, went to jail, the probation center, just got stuck on probation, in and out of jails. Okay, and it was a rough process. But I remember feeling suicidal. When I was 13, they put me on antidepressants, depression medicines, and I used to do some weird stuff as a kid, like choke myself out till I passed out. I don't know if it was more for attention, but it was also, there was like a helplessness. There was a, I don't know what to do, I'm out of control, why doesn't somebody love me kind of mentality, or just like a backdrop of, that was like the pulse that you could feel. It's like, how can I push the limits with everyone around me, so that if you're not meant to be in my life, I'm going to push you away, because I don't want, the falsehoods and stuff. And there's also an underdeveloped mentality. So it's like, the way I think about things now, as I'm relating to those experiences in the past, are with my updated understanding, my updated mentality and character. So you can't really remember exactly how you were feeling then, because you're a whole new person now. But from what I can remember, these are the things I was feeling. And so moving forward, I'm in and out of jails. And I remember really feeling like I wanted a child, I wanted a son. And that was a really strong desire. I don't know if, it just came from that place of emptiness and hurt, where, my dad wasn't there for me, and I wanted to be there for my son. So I just had a desire, but, I'm underdeveloped. My mentality was immature. I'm doing drugs. I'm hanging out with gangsters and people who I shouldn't be talking to. And by the time I'm 19, I'm introduced to meth and my son's mother. So two things happened. I start hardcore drugs, meth and cocaine at the same time. My son is born at 19. And I'm in a full-blown addiction. I'm hiding out at drug houses, away from my family. They've never been able to control me. They were never able to contain who I was. I was always running around doing the wrong things, and I'm Brandon, there's no stopping me. So that just spiraled out of control, and I tried to get clean over and over again. There'd be short spurts of it. I'd always tried to be there for my son, but eventually, he was put in the foster care system, and luckily my grandparents got to take care of him instead of him going to a foster family. But I was now plagued by, look at what I'm doing to my son. These feelings of unworthiness, of, I've let him down. I'm destroying his life, and I'm not able to give everything that I wanted as a child. I wanted to be able to give to my son, and now I'm withholding those things. So those things were weighing on me, and by the time I was around 24, I had began to make meth. I thought that I'd never see my son again. He moved with my grandparents to Arizona. I didn't know if they were coming back. But it was also more of a psychosis from the drugs, always making it worse than it actually is, and making excuses for your behavior. So I'm making meth, and at 24, the SWAT team, the police got tipped off, and the SWAT team kicked in my door. I had been, I knew they were out there for 3 hours. They had surrounded the place where I was holed up at the log cabin where I grew up. And when they came in to get me, I had already shot up over all the drugs I had made in the meth lab. I shot up every bit of it. I took over 30 Oxycontin and a couple fentanyl patches. I did all these drugs in an attempt to, I kept saying over to myself, I'd rather kill myself than go to prison, because I knew that's where I was headed. I gave up on trying. And so in an attempt to end my life, I did all these drugs, and then the SWAT team kicked in the door, and they found me hiding. I went to surrender, but being holed up in an area, they were pretty scared that I had gotten a gun or something. So they shot me with a taser and apprehended me. I won't go into any details. I needed my butt whooped, and that's what happened. So every once in a while you need a butt whooping, and I got one. And I went to the jail, and that, man, when I was in the cell there at the jail, I had realized, growing up in church, I had, loved God, but just in my own selfish way, doing what I wanted to do. But when I was in the jail cell and I had talked to the police and realized, CPS came and talked to me, said, you got caught with 21 meth labs. I was like, wow. I knew from just talking to people that a meth lab usually carries 20 years sentence, and I had 21 of them. So I was trying to count that. It's probably a while before I'll ever see the light of day. So I think I need to get right with God. And so in a real authentic way, I got on my knees and I surrendered to God. I let him know that I know that everything that's happened in my life, every bad thing, everywhere I've been, the place I am now, I know that I'm here because of me. Nobody else. And to know that in your heart, instead of just in your head, is a big deal. And I finally knew it in my heart. And so I surrendered my whole heart to him, and I told him, whatever happens, I'm yours. And that was a pivotal moment for me. I remember everything shifting. I remember, everything beginning to open up to me. I could barely stand up. The drugs had taken their toll on me, but I remember committing to being the very best person I could be, to learning all I could, to just drawing closer to him than ever before. And I began to, do 5 push-ups, 5 squats, and then I'd be passed out for the rest of the day. That's how bad my health was. But that progressed, and I began to, do these workouts that got so intense, people were talking about it on the block. I used to learn, and I had read the Bible, and I, no longer took any medications for depression, anxiety, ADHD, all that stuff. The medications were gone, and I was just depending on God, and God began to heal me. Literally, of all of that, the depression, the anxiety, the fear, all the things that I struggled with were gone, supernaturally. It did take a process. It took a couple months, which is not that long, to know that, after a couple months you could be healed from all of those things that you literally wanted to die, your whole life. Not knowing where you belong, or not feeling like you belonged. Because someone's feelings, whatever you focus on, you're going to feel, and that feeling becomes reality to you. So you might not have that hard of a life, but if you think you do, and you're causing yourself to suffer, that can be really intense. So that's where I was, and God totally delivered me. And yes, I went to prison. I only got 4 years, which, praise God, is not that bad, considering the things that I had to go through and the things that I did. So I went to prison and completely surrendered to God, completely walking with the Lord, and I was transformed. Multiple times I encountered danger. And when I say danger, people who wanted to stab you. I saw stabbings all the time. I prayed through those things, and, being somebody who wanted to rescue someone, but knowing that I'm surrounded by gangs and people who just don't care about you. There's many branches of Christianity, and I didn't know which ones, were the right ones. So I asked God, and he literally, spoke into my life, that still small voice. It's like your conscience. If you know what a conscience is, it's like your conscience, but being illuminated by the Spirit of God, where he directs you and guides you and gives you thoughts, words, or pictures that come out of nowhere, to guide you. And it lines up with his word, and lines up with who he is, his character. And there's ways to be led by him, and he showed me those ways. And so multiple occasions I was delivered out of danger, no fights, very close calls, but God became more real to me in that prison than ever before. And it was because I was surrounded on all sides by danger, and I had a choice to either get really good or really bad, and I chose to get really close to God. And so I developed all these habits of drawing close to him and developing my character. And by the time I was out of prison, I had been leading Bible studies and teaching classes and helping people find the Lord just by my example, and it was just a blessing to be able to do that. planning on being a pastor. And when I got out, went to a church, the same church I'm at now. And we were helping, grow the church, painting it, and I met my now wife. But unfortunately, she had got with an unbeliever, a really vile man who was abusive, and they were married and they were getting divorced. Now, being so filled with the Spirit, you'd think a man of God would know when he should steer clear. But I was also underdeveloped in some ways. So being underdeveloped in that area, relationally, I chose to override what I knew was right and start a relationship with a woman before, she was completely healed and delivered from that. So, and I rejected sound counsel and authority from my pastor and, got kicked out of church even. You don't know a lot of people who've been kicked out of church. I'm one of them. So, I went pursuing this relationship, and that ended up with, the death of 2 of my children, a relapse into drugs after almost 6 years or over 6 years clean off of methamphetamine. I relapsed for over 3 years, and I was in a dark place. And it becomes especially dark when you've tasted and seen that the Lord is good, that you've been surrendered to Him in every way, and known that you've seen His miraculous power in your life, and you've rejected Him again. That's really devastating on the mind and in the heart. And so that's where I was for over 3 years. And there came a point in time where the psychosis of the drugs were really setting in, and I went to go see my son, and he was hiding from me in the closet. And I always had the heart to be a good dad. It's like, man, why is my son hiding from me? I want to love him and pour into him and help him to rise up to be a man. And realizing that you're powerless, that you're not even being a man, how can you show your son to be a man? He's hiding in the closet from you. And when he came out, he was like, Dad, I just want you to get your life together. I remember those words. I just want you to get your life together. So I left the house where he was and pulled into my house, where my girlfriend at the time was sitting in the car. She brought me a sandwich. I guess it looked like I needed a sandwich, being on drugs. That's usually what happens. So right after that, the police pull into me, into the driveway there, and block me in, and I've got drugs in my pocket. They arrest me. And on the way there, they asked me to tell on some drug dealers, and I'm like, I don't know those drug dealers. I'm trying to keep the honor, honor amongst thieves, as they say. And then I never hear nothing about the drugs, I just served my time. But in there, I made a decision. My girlfriend had been telling me about Teen Challenge, I think I had actually mentioned to her before that, because I mentioned Todd White, and he had went to Teen Challenge, and I watched him in prison a lot. But she got stuck on it. She researched them and seen they had a really good, recidivism rate, and that she wanted me to go there, and that was a non-negotiable with her. Well, this time in jail, God literally sparked the ability to turn back to Him. I had been to jail before, during this relapse, and didn't turn back to Him. But He put that in me, that I could literally turn back to Him. And so I did. I said, Lord, I want to go to Teen Challenge. I'm going to go, not because my girlfriend wants me, but because I want to be close to You again. And He let me know in my heart that I could be. So I called Him on the 800 number in the jail, and they said, yeah, we'll take you. So when I went in front of the magistrate, the court, I was like, hey, I'm going to go to rehab. And they're like, oh, that's great. We don't care. We're going to let you out, on your own recognizance. We're going to give you a bond. Whatever you want to do, you can do. So they didn't make me go to rehab. So when I got out and I was released, my girlfriend was waiting in the car, and, she wasn't going to have no chance of me not going. She picked me up, brought me some donuts. At that time, hate sweets now, but during that time, I really wanted some donuts and some coffee on the way up there. You sound like I'm a police officer. Just kidding, guys. But she brought me up there, and I went, and I surrendered to the Lord. I mean, I really worked the program. We had prayer time at night, and it was really beautiful. I'd be on my face praying, surrendering, asking God to change every part of me, to grow me, to challenge me, to make me into the man that He wanted me to be finally. And He began to do that. And it was a beautiful time. But I had affairs. I had things going on outside of the rehab. I had to sell my house and things like that. And eventually, Teen Challenge, they said, hey, you can take care of your affairs, and then, maybe you can come back. And it was like 34 days in. So I remember on the bus ride home, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was really doing it this time. I was really surrendered. And now I'm on a bus ride home to the same exact drug-infested town, drug-infested house that I came from. I don't want to go back, God. And I heard Him tell me, then don't. Then don't. Mind you, I used to hear God really clear, but this time in my life, I hadn't been hearing Him very clearly, but I heard Him loud and clear tell me that I didn't have to go back to the drugs. So I made a decision on the bus ride home, going back to the same people, places, and things, that I would not go back to drugs. And I had no place to stay. A friend opened their house to me right in the same town, like a block down from my old house, which was still mine. I just wouldn't go there because I didn't trust myself. But they let me sleep on a little cot in their living room, and for that I am forever grateful. Little things like that people invest in you when you're your worst to get you to where you need to go. That's a beautiful thing. And without that, I probably wouldn't be here today. But I got a job, making like $16 an hour at a factory, making boxes. I'd listen to Audible all day long, just books of, things that I wanted to be better at. I wanted to start a business. My son's like, hey, I want to do a landscaping business. He was young. I was like, okay, we're going to do that. So I did. I started a landscaping business and quit that job and lived off of the landscaping business, training my son in it. Eventually got my own apartment. My son came to live with me full time, even though my rights had been terminated. He was on drugs and alcohol, following my bad example, and eventually got clean. And today he's got just a year less clean time than me. I've got about 3 years now, and he's got about 2. But it was beautiful just seeing that relationship restored. And, my girlfriend at the time, who had totally lost all trust in me, we were doing counseling at church, and we decided to get married. Been together over 8 years, and decided to get married. And that was beautiful. So now we moved in together, we're all living together, and, sometime in this time frame here, that was drugs that I got arrested with. And I thought that the cop had thrown him out. He had thrown him away, and he was honorable. He took responsibility. He didn't blame it on no one else. That's what I thought the cops were thinking. No, they just entered it into evidence, and it didn't come with the warrant until 6 months after I was clean. So 6 months being clean, police show up at the house, and I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, hey, get out and put your hands behind your back. I'm like, okay, this is familiar. So yeah, they arrested me, but this time in jail, it was fantastic. I mean, I was like on fire for the Lord. I was singing and praising, worshiping. I had total confidence in God. Sure enough, I got out a couple days later, just got to realize, though, those warrants weren't nothing, minor. They were life in prison. Okay, that was the charges I was facing. A drug double, a habitual possession of meth again, after I've already been in prison for it. Total charges tallied up to life in prison. So, really praying on that one. And my Pastor Jerry Solis, he came to the court. He had some good relationships with the prosecutor, and he vouched for me. And I know he's vouched for other people, and he's probably got burned, and, things didn't fall, didn't bode well for those people who tried to do good and, failed again. But he vouched for me, and they said they've never done this before, but they're dismissing all the charges. I got a hug from the prosecutor, which was really weird. But it was great, I was like, wow, this is God's mark on my life. And a long time ago, I wanted to be a pastor, and at this time I laid it down. I didn't seek it, I didn't pursue it. I was like, God, if you want that for me, you're going to have to make it happen. I'm just going to serve you. I'm going to serve my family. And so I did that. Fast track, to, I don't know if it's been a year or so, but, I was ordained as a pastor at Destiny Church, and now I get to pour into people's lives and use what God has poured into me to pour into other people. And it's really, really powerful knowing, a powerful reminder knowing that God has brought me through so much. And again, this is like a tiny little few-minute snippet of my testimony. There's 1,000 different things that have happened that I wasn't able to share here, but I just wanted to give you a little insight. I'm a realtor now, I'm a pastor, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I don't say those things lightly. Those aren't titles, those are who I am. That's my identity. I'm a child of God. I'm free from meth addiction, suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, fear, all those things are completely gone. I am totally filled with God's Spirit. I know what my purpose is. I know what He's called me to do. And one of the biggest things that is to reach other people with the gospel, with knowing that through Jesus Christ you can be forgiven, delivered of all your sins, all your fears. Everything that defined you in your past doesn't have to define you any longer. You can step into the fullness of who you were created to be. You can be born again. I'm living proof of that. And if there's anybody that needs any help, you can find me at Destiny Church. I've got some links, YouTube, Purpose Ignited 777, this TikTok channel. There's resources out there that can help you. If you need to contact me, come to our church. I would love to sit down with you and show you what we're about. We're about raising people up that struggled just like me. And a lot of other times people struggle in many different areas. And I've seen God change their life, like raising a dead man to new life. And that's the most beautiful thing you'll ever see. Because I was unrecognizable. And thanks to God, He totally changed everything about me. So I love you guys. I'm glad that you sat down with me for a few minutes just to hear a little bit of my story. I hope it helps somebody. Love you guys. God bless you.